going into this whole government inefficiency or government problems is, you look at what happened in Los Angeles this last week. You had the mayor of Los Angeles that attended this groundbreaking ceremony where they were going to build this 19-story um,
Two,
apartment
two,
complex. It's a
two
it's a
19 stories next to each other.
a homeless housing project with 278 units, scheduled to be completed by December 2023. And they were going to have 47, one-bedroom units. They were going to have, 228 studio units and three for the managers. So basically 278 units at a cost of $160 million, which comes out to an average per unit to about $575,000 per unit to help house a homeless population. I mean, in Los Angeles County, you can buy a condo for, now mind you, real estate there's a lot more expensive, but you can buy a condo there for $550,000 and everyone could own it.
Hmm.
And the thing is like when you're spending all this money, $575,000 just to construct it, that doesn't include all the other money for services. That doesn't include all the other money for management in the sense of, if the property gets damaged, for meals or any other types of assistance that's going to be coming into that particular area.
You're right. Um, it's just crazy what's happening, and really it does. If you take a step back though, from the numbers you just recited, and look at it from the standpoint of, as we just did, of what it really says. And what it really says is their goal is not to solve homelessness. Their goal is to create a good life for homeless people. The goal should be to solve the homelessness problem, not to make a good life for homeless people, in that, you can do things like, and I think I forget where it was, but I did see someplace where for $60,000 you can put up these prefabricated single-family dwellings that basically have a bathroom and a studio with a bed and a living room kind of thing and a kitchen. And they're very small, but they're safe, they're insulated, you have your own bathroom, you have your own kitchen. You could put these things up on massive amounts of, any land that you can find, and it costs 60 grand. And, is it comfortable? No. Is it, is it, a good way of living? Not necessarily for the long term. But the idea is not to create great homes for homeless people. It's to get homeless people the help they need to not become homeless on their own, as opposed to what they're doing, which is make them homeless dependent on government. And once you do that, you got to keep feeding that beast of government with more and more money. So what they're really trying to do is get people dependent on government. What they need to do, first of all, is start by treating the homeless as not one thing. They say, well, there's the homeless. Well, I'm not a sociological expert, but here's what I know. There are some people that are homeless because they want to be homeless. There are some people that are homeless because they run on hard times. There are some people like veterans who are homeless because they served our country, gave us freedom, came back, couldn't get help, and now they're out on the street. Which, by the way, if I were the mayor of LA, I'd make sure every one of those damn units that they're building are filled with veterans who are homeless, because they've given to this country to be able to have that kind of, nice home place to stay. So you have, and there are some that are out there that are just so drug dependent and drug addicted that, it doesn't matter whether you put them in a small place for 60 grand or you put them in a luxury condo for 577 grand. They ain't going to make it. They need to be someplace where they can't do damage to themselves and damage to others. That's not a politically popular thing, but that's the reality of life. So what LA is doing in a very kind of backhanded way is not solving the homeless problem. They're just creating the homeless as a dependent of the government. And we all who live in LA are paying for that. If we were creating a system that helped the homeless, that had someplace safe to stay, they had some responsibility of that place, and it was a transitional thing, that's one thing. But man, if you're moving into a $577,000 place, chances are you're not going to be in a hell of a hurry to go move into a one-bedroom apartment that's maybe 300 square feet, that's a studio, and some community someplace. So they're creating a dependency class that people in LA, and what it does to me is it shows what, again, the philosophical mentality of the way our government here is approached. It's to me, it's absolutely mind-boggling that this thing is happening. It's, you look at how much more could be done and better could be done. Homelessness should be a thing of transition. It shouldn't be codified as a lifestyle. And that's what the government in LA is doing. They're codifying it as a lifestyle by creating these places that when people move into, they're not going to want to move out of. Yes, there are groups of homeless folks that need to have places that are safe, need to have places where they can get back on their feet, need to have places where there's some dignity, absolutely. But you don't need to spend $577 a shot as they're doing with this thing. You need to do these other things that will transition them to self-dependence, as opposed to what they're doing, which is transitioning them to complete dependence on the government.
Well, and that's not the most expensive one, though. There's one in Koreatown where they spent $740,000 for a 200 square foot unit for homelessness. And the thing is, part of it is, I think, you've got this billions of dollars that the voters of California passed, the voters of Los Angeles passed in a bond. I think it was $1.2 billion. Then you've got the state that's spending billions of dollars on this homeless thing, and so you've got a bunch of bureaucrats that I probably look at it as like, well, we've got all this money, we got to figure out a way to spend it, as opposed to, being good stewards of how we spend this money. I mean, I've always been to the belief is bring in the housing, some of these big housing giants, bring in some of these other folks who understand financing and said, okay, how do we get together and how do we construct, if these units cost, right now $575,000, how do we construct units that cost us $50,000 or $100,000 so that we can house more people? But at the same time, it's, part of the story never talked about, okay, so how long are these homeless going to live in these apartments or in these units? Do you have it for 1 year transition and say, okay, look, you've got 1 year, or, let's just say you got 18 months to get your life together, to get cleaned up, to get job training, to go through some educational program that allows you to be back on your feet.
Let me ask you a question. Does that sound like government in LA to you?
What does it sound like government anywhere? I mean, because this is California. California just passed a budget that's going to provide $12 billion over the next 3 years on homelessness. And so with all these, you got California has got a minimum wage at $15 an hour, 14. I believe this year it's 14, and the next year I think it moves up to 15. You've got all these jobs that are offering $18 an hour to go and hire people. Incentives is, why not help? And you're right. We put people into different categories. It's not just one size fits all, but get these people ready to go get some of these jobs so they can be self-sufficient and transition out, live that apartment over for the next person. I mean, we would be, and I get a little heated on this just because of all this money being spent and just the insanity of it, but it would be easier and probably more cost effective if you just went out and rented an entire apartment complex and paid everyone's rent of $2,000 a month and said, okay, you got 18 months to transition out and leave that apartment for the next person who we're going to transition out, and the next person and the next person.
It's what they're trying to do, and they are doing it. I mean, not forget trying. What they're doing is taking this population and making them dependent on the government. Why would you, if you're living in a place like what they're building in LA, why would you want to go get a job? I mean, seriously, you got a great place to live, you got food on the table. Why would you want to go get a job? I mean, it's a disincentive to people to do that. And so, what it is, it's social engineering is what it is. And it doesn't solve, the homeless problem because there's just going to be more and more people on the street because people can't afford to live here anymore unless big government comes in and puts its arms around you and builds you these things with taxpayer money. So now you become dependent on the government to take care of you. I mean, I don't mean to sound like the conspiracy people that are out there, but it's not conspiracy, it's reality. That's what they're doing. Again, what we talked about. There are ways you can help. There are some people you just can't. You just need to get them off the street. You need to put them, in a place somewhere that they're out of everybody's way because they do themselves and everybody else no good. And maybe a few of those will be able to, get the help they need to become able to get back into society. But some are so far gone, all you want to do is try and get them off the street so they're not a harm to themselves or anybody else. Then there are others that run onto hard times and they need some time to get back on their feet. Yes, give them a place with dignity. Give them a place with a path to help themselves. But to build these things, and government should never be in this business, by the way. I mean, after spending 4 years in federal government and seeing what the General Services Administration does in terms of leasing buildings and federal offices and what they pay and what they get for what they pay, I'm more convinced than ever there are certain things that government should never be involved with. When it's somebody else's money, it's pretty easy to spend, and that's the mentality that's there. They don't see it as our money; they see it as their money. And as long as that exists and that mentality exists, and we let them get away with it, they're going to do this over and over again.